Throughout the course of the Dragon Ball story, Akira Toriyama introduced audiences to a multitude of interesting characters. Be they humans, aliens, androids, or gods, they each made some sort of impact on the story and the world as a whole. Many of them first appeared as solo characters, either serving to help Goku or stand in his way. But then there are those who didn't come alone, and rather debuted as a pair. This not only increased the stakes, but allowed Toriyama to more thoroughly flesh out their characters by giving them someone to play off of. As a result, their personalities would shine through from the very first encounter. But who is the best duo in the Dragon Ball franchise? Which team has the greatest chemistry that allows them to stand tall above the rest? Well, in this video, we're going to discuss that. Make sure to subscribe to this channel and enable notifications so you can see all of my content right away when it comes out. So joining me in this video today is someone you've seen on my channel in the past, and that is Geekdom101. How's it going?
Hey, I'm happy to be back talking about Dragon Ball and duos. And yes, Toriyama definitely uses this, and not just Toriyama, other writers do as well. You know, it's something that's been done in fiction where if you introduce two characters, they can play off each other, and then you've also got the, you know, I've always been a big fan of like the little guy bossing the big guy around. So like Vegeta and Nappa would be like the first duo that comes to mind because, you know, you've got the big guy Nappa, little guy Vegeta, and when you look at them initially, let's say you've never seen Dragon Ball before, when you look at them, one would easily say, oh, well, the little guy's the servant and the big guy's the boss, you know, but that's not the case at all. It's the other way around. So Toriyama plays with that a lot. Same thing with Babidi and Majin Buu. You know, Majin Buu is obviously stronger, but Babidi is a guy who he's kind of got Buu for a while. Obviously, eventually Buu turns on him, but he's the guy who's kind of got Buu by the balls, no pun intended, because he knows the spell to reseal him. And then Buu grabs him by the throat so he can't talk, and we have a very, very violent scene in Dragon Ball. Very bloody back in the day. But yeah, so I do like how Toriyama uses that, but you know, from the beginning, the first duo was Bulma and Goku. In fact, the very first episode of Dragon Ball, if you're going by the Japanese titles, is called Buruma to Son Goku, Bulma and Son Goku. It's the beginning of the story that would go on for a very, very long time.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, getting back into Vegeta and Nappa, you know, something that I really liked about what Toriyama did there is all throughout Dragon Ball, one of the big things, kind of going back to the idea that was created with Astro Boy, is that this really small kind of childlike character who has extreme levels of power and can defeat these much bigger opponents. You know, we saw that all throughout Dragon Ball with Goku, and then with Krillin, for example, where Toriyama turned the trope of the big, strong, muscly action hero kind of on its head there, which is even cooler considering that it came out during the 1980s when we had people like Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone, you know, like these huge, muscly action heroes, and he kind of flipped it around there. But going back to Vegeta and Nappa, he did the same thing, where Vegeta, who was going to be the character who ultimately became this ultimate rival to Goku, was someone who also was the smaller of the two Saiyans, and yet he was so much more fierce than Nappa and every other Saiyan that we had seen introduced. And I think that that's definitely played a big role in why Vegeta has had such staying power, because in many ways he kind of was that inverse of Goku, and you know, I think that they definitely played on that well in the Saiyan saga moving forward. In addition to that, there definitely have been some other really interesting and cool duos that have been introduced, especially in Dragon Ball Z, with one of my favorites definitely being the androids, numbers 17 and 18.
Yeah, I feel like when it comes to 17 and 18, you know, they're siblings, but you don't know that right away. I feel like with them, you know, as far as like them working together, especially the future 17 and 18, you know, tag team wise, I hate to bring that up, but it's one of those things where, you know, they work together and you see them doing these really vicious double team moves on like Gohan and Trunks, who, by the way, Toriyama also kind of made a duo there. You know, they're the last two alive in the future, but they did that so that Gohan kind of be the mentor and pass it down to Trunks. You know, that makes sense. And then have Trunks be the savior that goes back in time. But 17 and 18, I think, have some amazing double team moves. And you know who else has great double team moves? Zamasu and Goku Black. I mean, obviously they have the same brain, so that might be why, but they, I think, worked really well together in the future battle with Trunks and Goku and Vegeta. And I think they should be talked about as well when you're talking about some of the best duos. A more recent example, you You've also got Goten and Trunks, Kid Goten, sort of being the new shonen protagonist. I've talked about this before, people have asked, why did Goku become a kid in GT? Because in shonen manga, it's very common that you have at least some kind of kid protagonist. You've got Goku, he grows up, then Gohan is the new kid in Z, then Gohan grows up in the Buu saga and goes to high school, and then Goten and Trunks become the new protagonist. Because it's, easy to write comedy, and I think Goten and Trunks did do a lot of really good comedic stuff. The Mighty Mash stuff was great as well. So, those are the ones that come to mind to me. Like, as far as like my favorite one though, would you count Goku and Vegeta?
Yeah, absolutely.
They're the two main characters now.
Yeah, and especially with current Dragon Ball, like the modern idea of what Dragon Ball is, it's Goku and Vegeta tending to stand right next to each other. Not necessarily in equal prominence, because Goku has and probably always will be the protagonist, aside from, a few points here and there with Goten, Trunks, and of course Gohan. But besides that, Goku and Vegeta and their rivalry is something that's pushed Dragon Ball pretty much all throughout the Dragon Ball Super era, where they're constantly not only competing against each other, but nowadays teaming up side by side to take on these ultimate villains such as Goku Black and Zamasu, and, enemies in the Tournament to Power.
Broly.
And of course, Broly, because Broly is someone who just shows up, he's super powerful, and, even two Super Saiyan Blues who just fought in a tournament that could end the entire multiverse still aren't really much of a chance for him until they fuse together.
Well, they had to make it interesting.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it was a lot of fun along the way. So I definitely think that they're a great pick, and I could see why they'd be your favorite duo. For me, I guess that, Android 17 and 18, they're just such a menacing team. And, as villains, and then nowadays as protagonists, I feel like, especially up until the most recent arc of Super, at least in the anime, they were kind of underrated, especially because, they were overshadowed by Cell in their own arc.
They were, yeah, they were. Their biggest shining moment was, as far as like just badassery, was the Trunks special. It really was. Their fights in Z were usually individual fights. Piccolo versus 17, 18 versus Vegeta. And then, of course, 17, 18 together wiped out all the Z fighters for that one episode. I think it was Dragon Ball Z episode 139, if I remember correctly. I could be wrong on that, though. Somewhere around there. But yeah, and also, I don't know if we even mentioned Beerus and Whis, but another duo that Toriyama introduced, and there's always one that's stronger than the other. And even though Beerus is introduced as being this god of destruction who's the scariest dude ever, Whis is just his handler until you find out at the end of the film that's his master. And then as Dragon Ball Super began and progressed and whatnot, we then find out that Whis is an angel, which is like, we'd actually now know that in the god hierarchy, angels are above gods of destruction. So we didn't know that. We just thought he was just a strong old master, and then we know there's more universes and more different versions. I don't want to say versions of Whis, but you know what I'm saying. Like, yeah, the different Whises.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because in many ways it's like the opposite of the other divine duo that we were introduced to in Dragon Ball with Kami and Popo.
Right.
Where Kami is the more powerful of the two, unless you go by like the Team 4-star version.
Right, yeah.
And basically in, Dragon Ball Super, the attendant essentially is more powerful and of a higher order.
Well, it's also the same thing with Kibito and Kaioshin. Kaioshin is more powerful than Kibito, supposedly, but they're not that strong, so it doesn't really matter that much.
Yeah, even when they fuse together, maybe they could have beaten Deborah, but they definitely don't stand a chance against Kid Buu or, anyone else. So it is kind of funny when you go back to how Potara is supposed to work, but that's a whole other topic for another time. And that's more about taking duos and making them into a single person, Same thing with Goten and Trunks becoming Gotenks, Technically two people, but we can't really count them as a duo anymore at that point. But Toriyama definitely did introduce a lot of really interesting duos I think worked really well together, and I feel like added a lot more layers to their character as opposed to if they were just to be introduced as a single character. But ultimately, like I said, I think that my favorite is probably someone like 17 and 18 or Beerus and Whis, because, I've had a lot of fun with their characters ever since Toriyama introduced them. Probably not someone like Tien and Chaozu, because, yeah.
Well, I gotta be real with you. I've changed my pick. My favorite was Goku and Vegeta, but really my favorite duo in Dragon Ball is Marin's big, huge, delicious eyes. Those are nice.
Yeah, they're blue, I think. Anyway, guys, who is your favorite duo out of all of those introduced in Dragon Ball so far? Let us know down below, although I am sure many of you will agree with Geekdom's picks. Also, make sure to check out Geekdom101 in the end screen and the description. He has a really cool video out right now about Vegeta's final flash, and if it could have beaten Perfect Cell. A video that he talked about doing for a long time, so it's cool to finally see it up on his channel. And if you're new to this channel, make sure to subscribe and enable all notifications so that you can see all my videos and community posts right away when they come out. And make sure to stick around because there's a lot more to come in the future.
Yeah, and you better subscribe.